Welcome back to the Stephan Hogan podcast. This is your host, Stephan Hogan. It's great to have you here today. Did you know that the majority of the people that listen to this podcast are not subscribed? Well, help the show and hit subscribe. You can watch it on YouTube. We film all the episodes when these podcasts come out. The best way to help the podcast is just to share it. I woke up with the song The Painter by Cody Johnson stuck in my head this morning, and the director and writer of that music video, as well as Human, as well as Till You Can't. Hailing from Nashville, CMT, CMA, and now ACM award-winning director and photographer Dustin Haney grew up loving film. He got a waterproof camera from Walmart, got him hooked. Previous works span vast networks and publications in today's media, such as multiple features in Rolling Stone and People magazine, with videos constantly circulating on CMT. Haney's portfolio features collaborations with some of the biggest names in entertainment today. Names in country such as Luke Combs, Cody Johnson, Luke Bryan, Lainey Wilson, Brooks and Dunn, Parker McCollum, Alan Jackson, and extending into rock and roll. Here is Dustin Haney.
I had some great luck at ACMs this year. We won Visual Media of the Year 2024 for Parker McCollum's Burn It Down music video, which was, that was an awesome project. That was like from start to finish, kind of one of those that stuck out in the year. I feel like you get like, especially as a music video director, like you do a few of them a year. That was one of those that I was like, this is definitely top of the bucket as far as what we did this year, which was super validating to go down to ACMs, and then they announced that it won, and you know, now there's a trophy to sit on the shelf and helps you remember it down the line. But yeah, that was one too that so it was fun. I won my first award at CMTs a couple years ago with Cody Johnson, and I won Male Video of the Year for Till You Can't, which was just a hammer of a song for him.
Yeah, I was gonna say that song. Well, my mom passed of brain cancer like a year and a half ago, and
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, man, it was just like, it comes up in almost every podcast, I feel like, because it's such a part of my story, being 35 and losing your mom. It just doesn't feel right, you know, but she was almost 40 when I was born, but it was just like out of the blue.
Yeah, regardless, that's hard.
Yeah, it was really hard. And I think I'm grieving more now in year 2. Like, it's just really like hitting me.
Yeah.
But that song was really special because it was the song that was played at her memorial service while the slideshow went on of all the pictures that I had put together from her being a little girl till, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just so powerful. I feel like that song is bigger than Cody and bigger than the video. It's like there's something really special about that song.
There is. So special that it waited around for him to cut it. Because if you listen to Cody tell the story just about him finding that song, the writers had it for a while, and then Cody's such a song picker. Like, he loves to just go through and like pick the best songs, and that was one that I think had been around for a second, and then he was like, I wanted to bring it to life. But that was the first job I worked on with Cody. But I was kind of pining for a Cody video. I'd worked with his label a good bit, and I was like really wanting to work with him. And my wife actually turned me on to Cody because my wife used to be an artist, and way back in the day when she was still doing music, she and Cody used to write together all the time. And she's from Texas as well, so they had that cool Texas history together. So my wife has known Cody far longer than I have. But then, you know, we kind of connected over that, him and I did, and we did that video, and that was a fun video because I wrote really hard for it. Like, when I heard this song, that was one of those it's just a heavy song, and like it brings up, like, you know, you with your mom, it brings up emotions for so many different people. And I luckily haven't had a lot of loss in my life, but the thing that really resonated to me on that song was brothers, because I have 3 brothers that I'm really close to, and I was like, you know, I feel like that, like, you got to pick one, right? The song kind of lists through like all the different, like, you know, if you got a chance, like, give that girl an engagement ring, like, go fishing with your dad, like, you know, if your mom calls, pick it up, that kind of thing. And so I was trying to find something the song maybe didn't say that gave it another layer so that you got more from the video. And that's what resonated with Cody when he read my idea for it. He was like, oh, he's saying something that the song doesn't say. And then I had gotten really into doing live dialogue in a lot of my videos because I was realizing that it impacted people a lot more when you got to really treat it for the format instead of it just being about the song. It also got to add that second layer of video. So we did the audio on Till You Can't, and that performance from the actress in that bridge level moment is just like kind of the huge hammer that just hits you in the soul when you see that video. But yeah, that was that song got way bigger than I ever thought it would, and I think probably than Cody even thought it would. But it definitely gave the video wings too. Like the view count on that video is insane. But
what's it at? Do you know?
I think it's close to 100 million now. It's like maybe it's at 90.
Wow.
Something like that. I haven't checked it in a while, but it's been climbing. I mean, the streams for that song climb so much. Hearing him do that live, like as soon as that little guitar part comes in the beginning, everybody's just like, oh my God, and goes crazy live. But yeah.
I didn't listen to that song until I watched it in preparation for this. I haven't listened to it since my mom passed.
Really?
Yeah.
Man.
Got me all teared up.
Oh yeah. I'm sure it was fresh then.
Yeah. But the storytelling is what you do so well.
Thank you.
How did you learn to tell stories?
That's kind of always been my thing. The first thing I ever remember wanting to be as a kid, a lot of kids are like, I want to be a police officer or an astronaut or something. The first thing I wanted to be was a comic book artist. I was really into freehand art, and I really wanted to draw for comics or animation and stuff. So I read a ton of comic books growing up and made a few as a kid. And so I went through actually a composition course in middle school, I guess. I was homeschooled, so it's tough for me to keep track of what middle school and high school is. But somewhere around the age of like 12 or 13, I did a composition course that was a Marvel thing. And it was just on how to like put your stories within the frames and everything. So I also watched a ton of movies. But I knew early on, like storytelling was a thing that I just was captivated by. So I really wanted to find some way of expressing that in whatever I ended up doing. And I didn't really chase it as a career, actually. It was definitely a hobby. And I was like, oh, there's people that do that full time. They like draw comics and stuff. Maybe I'll do that. And then kind of fell into photography and ended up here.
How old were you when you got your first camera?
My first stills camera, I was 9. It was a little Walmart underwater housing 35 millimeter camera and took awful pictures. But I always used to love getting in the lake and flashing it underwater, and you're chasing fish around with it. Most of it was just jumping in with your siblings and taking pictures that didn't turn out. But
yeah, and then dropping off the roll at the...
Yep, dropping off the roll at Walmart.
Yeah.
Yeah, back when they had a photo development area.
Yeah, that was always so exciting because I had a camera too, and I was like, you don't know what your picture is going to look like or how it's going to turn out.
Yeah. I still shoot some film stills today, and I shoot some picture film too as well. But it feels so nostalgic, but also really fun because you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But it costs an arm and a leg these days. It's definitely a pricey hobby.
Yeah.
But
and what about, so let's go to the ACM that you just won. So you have a CMT award, an ACM award,
and a CMA award.
And
my first award was a CMT with Cody. We were up for Video of the Year and Male Video of the Year, and we won Male Video of the Year. And then we went to CMAs in 2022, and we won Video of the Year at the CMAs. And Parker McCollum actually presented Cody and I with that award, which was super cool because I wanted to work for Parker. And then Parker and I talked about that down in Texas. It was kind of full circle because he presented me with my first CMA, and then we got to accept like our first ACM Video of the Year together. 2 years later.
That's pretty special.
Yeah.
Serendipitous moment.
Yeah.
So when it came to getting, and what I think people are going to be curious about is how did you get to the point from shooting underwater with a Walmart camera, to being at the point where you're winning awards for your work, being a director. That's the highest level you can get. is the director.
Yeah.
You know, and you're 31,
31, almost. Yeah.
almost 31, and you're the director of these huge videos. And so like that's got to be incredibly humbling.
It is. Yeah. I pinch myself every time awards season rolls around because it's very industry run, and it's very I count myself really blessed every time that I have a video up, because you never really know. You know, you work as hard as you can on everything and then hope that, you know, the gods of country shine on something. But yeah, I've been at it for probably over a decade. Doing no budget music videos and photo shoots to, you know, the big budget ones that we're doing now. And I count myself very blessed to get to do it. It's kind of a little bit with TikTok and short form content being so popular. It's a little bit of a dying breed these days, where music videos, there's far less of them than there were back in the day. So I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to still get to do this stuff. But yeah, I've been trudging through the trenches for sure to try and get there. I did probably, I got to count, but I'm sure I'm over 100 music videos at this point. It's like I added up one year that I had been doing 25 a year for 4 or 5 years in a row. So I'm definitely, by that math, I'm definitely over 100.
So how many hours go into one music video?
Typically, I'll get a solicit a month to 2 weeks before we were supposed to shoot, something like that.
What's a solicit?
So a solicit is where someone from a label will send me a music video solicit, and it'll be for whatever song, and they'll outline kind of the terms of the job, like when they want to shoot, where they want to shoot, how much money they want to spend, and then it's up to me to turn in an estimate. So we have a couple things, and in the music video line of work, there's direct bids, and then there's open bids. So open bids go out to a lot of directors, and then you're writing against everyone else's idea, and then they pick whoever they want, and you don't get paid if they don't pick you. So there's a whole career behind me of videos that never got made.
So you put in all this work, storyboarding, coming up with creative ideas, to submit it.
Yeah.
It's like writing a song for sync to submit for a movie.
Yeah.
And you don't even know if it's going to end up in the movie and they're going to choose it or not. But I mean,
and if it doesn't get played, you don't get paid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. How many people could you be up against?
Typically at the level I'm at now, it's nice because I feel like it's usually, if it's an open bid where I'm at in my career today, it's usually 5 of us max. But
that still seems like a lot.
I mean, your odds are kind of tough.
1 in 5 isn't great.
1 in 5 is not great. So, but I've been on one with as many as 10 I've heard of before. And those are obviously harder to win. But those are actually, unfortunately, those are usually the lower budget jobs. I feel like there's a lot of people eager to break in on the lower budget front, and for the client, it's a little bit less of a risk, right? So like a lower budget video, you might take more of a chance on someone who's not quite as proven. So you might submit out just to see. It depends on who's sending the solicit. Some commissioners are the people at the labels that would send you the solicit. Depending on their style and the way they like to work, they may be very best idea win and then submit to a lot of people. But then there's also commissioners who are great to work with that are very like, oh, you're proven and have this kind of style. We think for this song and this artist, you'd be a good fit. And then you start to get catered to. And then, down the line, once you've done enough videos with an artist, you typically end up getting direct bids. Like I have a lot of artists I work with that, there is no other director writing, and it's just, hey, what do you want to do, Dustin? That kind of thing.
Is that how it works with Cody? Because you did Human.
Yeah. Cody and I are on that level now where we just have such a great working relationship, and we're a few videos deep at this point.
That's beautiful, man.
That
makes it simple too for the artist side, where it's like, I don't have to worry. I got my guy Dustin.
Yeah. It's such a special relationship, and it's one that you pine for a long time, because I've clicked with Cody probably more than I've clicked with almost any other artist I've worked with. And I think it's a combination of, we grew up very similar. We're very similar people. have a lot of the same mindset. And but most importantly, I think we both interpret music the same. So when he sends me a song, we've yet to have a conversation where we started off base. If he has even a fragment of an idea for the video, it's pretty much exactly what I'm kind of already doing in my head. So we've gotten to the point now. It's like we're shooting the video for Dirt Cheap next week, and that was one that we were talking at ACMs 2 weeks ago, and he was just like, he's like, yeah, just Till You Can't was great, Human was great, so Dirt Cheap rolled around, and we did The Painter as well, and he was like, and then The Painter was this, and he's like, Dirt Cheap. I was just like, let Dustin do his thing. But it's also, it's nerve-wracking a little bit because like it's so great to have that trust, but it almost makes you work harder to have that trust. Knowing that he's not really watching as intently as he might have on our first collaboration makes me go, okay, like you have free reign, but don't go crazy here. Like there's a responsibility to this song and this artist that, and I think that's probably why we work really well together. It's like we both kind of respect that.
Yeah, I really loved the video for Human. I mean, just on a cinematography level.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, you need to go to YouTube, search Cody Johnson Human, and watch it.
That's a very special video. I spent
why talk to me about
that. That's Human. Cody Johnson's Human is a special video because we spent a couple of months doing that one. And we actually had a little bit of a false start with that one where we were supposed to shoot it in May of the year that we shot it. We were supposed to shoot it in May and it got pushed to September because him and I had a phone call and we were headed to, there were some parameters that had been set in place for his availability that were trying to dictate us shooting it all in one day in Nashville. And him and I had a phone call and we were like, we got to pull the plug on this. And he was the one that called it on pulling the plug. He was like, I want to do proper due diligence to this song. Let's push it and do it right. So we ended up, it was a big budget video, but mainly because I had to shoot it over, I think 8 or 10 shooting days. I went out, I shot all the live stuff on the road. And then Cody shot with me in Texas for all of the horseback stuff and that kind of thing. And that was one that you always got to be a little careful when you're showcasing, in my opinion. You always have to be a little careful when you showcase the live stuff because a lot of people put out live videos, but it ends up just being a live video. And it's not like there's no narrative. There's no like, it's all staged, which is super cool. It's all the bells and whistles and lights. But I impressed on Cody that we needed to show the human side of the touring stuff, and we needed to see him like in the in-between moments that most people would cut out of a video. Like,
that's my favorite part.
I'm glad it resonated because all those little moments of him side stage in between songs, or even the ending shot is one of my favorites where he hands off his guitar and he takes the next guitar for the next song. It's like most of the time you would just end on a really great close-up of him smiling, and it's like, no, let's show like that moment that you'd normally cut out.
And
like
it shows him in a t-shirt with, wearing a hat, being on the phone with his wife.
Yeah. It kind of has that narrative storyline feel, like she's at home with the kids, but in a more real and cinematic way. Yeah.
And that's I heard this and I've said it before, but I was told by someone, his name's Rob Floyd, and he told me that people love stories, but they, like taking it a step further, they love secrets.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is the secret, that peek behind the curtain into what is it actually like when the artist is not on the stage.
Yeah. I feel like too, in today's world, you don't see a lot of authenticity and stuff anymore. Everyone's very catered to show, it's curated, right? Instagram, like everyone's feed is curated, and you don't get to see a lot of actual authentic life, and those moments you would cut out. So it's throwing some of those in. There's an honesty in it that becomes very popular, and I think people are very on the honest thing. It's like you look at all the people that are blowing up off of TikTok, a lot of it is like the imperfection that's making them seem so approachable. And it's the
humanity of the human. No pun intended, but it really is the humanity. I think this applies to music really well because everything's gotten so perfect in music. When I listen to my favorite records, or you talked about, your love for 90s country, they're recording the tape. Stuff was not perfect, man.
Yeah.
And that's why those records are always going to be great.
Yeah.
And live on. And I think we have lost that human connection.
Yeah.
How important is that to you when you're coming up with a treatment, you're writing, you're storyboarding? How important is that?
It's everything to me. The authenticity is like, my wife says I'm a broken record on that one because she totally agrees with me. But I say the word authenticity all the time. It's just like one of my words I picked up a couple years ago to be my new word of the year, and it's stuck around. It's like,
well, it's an intention.
It's an intention, and it's everything. Because if you don't start with that, you have to start with that because people can sniff it out a mile away. If the artists that, to put it bluntly, have no shit on their shoes and wear a cowboy hat, like, you can tell they're not cowboys. So you got to start with that authenticity in some shape or form, and there's plenty of cowboys that don't have horses, but you got to find that authentic realism and just not force it. I'm a big advocate on wardrobe in videos. Like, I'll be the first person to tell the artist to take those clothes and like switch to something that they would normally wear on a day, because a lot of times working on big budget videos, you have budget for wardrobe and they'll bring in like all brand new clothes. And there's nothing worse to me than seeing an artist that is wearing something they look like they've never worn before in their life. And to me, I'm like, you're doing a disservice to yourself. You have to like start with that honesty, because then you're more comfortable, like if you're in shoes you've walked in, you're more comfortable. And it shows on camera. It's just the way you carry yourself, the way you appear. And I think the imperfection is beautiful. It's like talking about music and how they recorded in the 90s. I still listen to cassette tapes all the time in the house. I have a cassette player in the house and I have a vinyl player in the house. And
me too.
It's
me and my son, not to interrupt, but we were talking before. You have a 1-year-old.
Yep.
And we have a 15-month-year-old. So we're not too far apart on that as first-time dads.
Yeah.
But me and Harlan will go down to the record store, and it's like a once every other week thing, and we'll get a new record and come home, put it on, and he's just fascinated. He'll stand there for a whole record and just stare up at it and dance.
Yeah. Does he do the bounce up and down thing?
Yeah, he bounces up and down, and he just absolutely loves music. But in particular, the record player, he points to it, and he's like,
my son does the same thing.
It's really cool.
It's cool to carry that tradition on, because you can always have the fanciest, nicest new speaker, but it's like there's something so nostalgic and a feeling. My dad put it really great one day. He was talking about his old pickup truck, and he had the cassette player in it, and he was like, once you were out in the country and you couldn't get a radio station on, like if you were pulled up in a circle out at a bonfire, somebody to open their doors and, put a cassette in. But if there was a song you wanted to listen to, you had to listen to the whole cassette deck, and, or you had to like scrub it through and like do the fast forward thing. And he was like, you got to experience music in more of an album format and like, stumble upon some hidden gems that you otherwise wouldn't hear. And it's like, I do feel like we're going back to that though, which is really cool. Like everyone's recording a lot of like projects and like periods of life packed into one album instead of just doing the one hit wonder kind of single thing, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think the album is coming back.
Yeah.
I don't think that people have the luxury of being able to hit next in a music video. You have to wait it out to see what happens.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it is cool.
And a movie's like that too. But one of the things that, as I was watching all your videos on your website and then even more on YouTube and behind the scenes stuff, I noticed that after I watched the first, I was like, oh, this happened. Like there's these stages in the video that you use to keep the momentum and the engagement as well and tell the story.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I love this because I'm excited to see what's going to happen next.
Thank you.
Because so many times in today's world, I feel like the budgets have been just like shattered in music video world, and people just shoot with an FX3 and do like a 2-location shoot, and their budget's nothing, and it's so competitive.
Yep.
Would you agree?
Yeah. No, budgets are not anywhere where they used to be, and it's usually a time constraint. Music videos don't get a ton of love anymore, but it's kind of. You definitely got to take a lot of those that don't starting out, and then hopefully find yourself on the bigger side of them where artists are like really putting a lot of energy and effort into it and want to put up what they need for it. But
And you get that little extra with yours, especially when there's the dialogue in the story.
yeah,
One of the things that really touched me in one of the videos I was watching was that homeless looking man going in and getting some booze,
yeah,
and he sees it talks about him and being in Vietnam, I think, and losing his friend.
Yeah.
And he pulls out a picture, and it's in front of him, and it's this crumpled up picture in black and white
yeah,
of someone that he lost, and there's this fire burning in front of him, in the metal trash can, and it's looking up at him, and you're just seeing his heartache, and it brings the humanity into like, I understand why this guy is self-medicating.
That video is actually a sequel too. You'll have to go back. That's Tyler Braden's Secret music video. Song title Secret. And we all felt really special when we thought we were on a secret mission or something. We were emailing back and forth about that because the title was Secret. It was always in the subtitle of all our emails. It's like Secret Project. But no, Tyler Braden, he's great. If you haven't checked him out, go give him a listen. But we did a few videos together, and the first one we did was Love is a Dead End Road. And that video turned out, it was a heavy narrative, and it was so great that when we ended up doing a second one, we were like, can we just continue the story a little bit from that first one into the second one? And then Secret was the second one, but that's the one that I think blew up the most with people. But I'm glad you gravitated onto that one because that's a cool project.
I mean, we all know the big names that country radio pushes that go up the charts.
Yeah.
But I think it's important. And I even found myself, I was like, well, I don't know who that is. I don't want to click on it as much.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? That person deserves for me to click on it more than the person that I already know about.
Oh, yeah. It's like deep cuts.
It's deep cuts. And to me, when that was the one besides just Till You Can't, because of the emotional impact with my mom, that was the one that impacted me on an emotional level. It was a very emotional song, portrayed very emotionally.
Yeah.
I was wondering where the moonshine came from, and I'll have to go back and watch the first part.
I'm trying to remember how the moonshine scene came about.
Because he was in like an alley.
It was in an alley. Yeah. I was actually the guy slinging booze. I was the guy with my hood up and my beanie on. I can't remember how I ended up being either the actor that was supposed to be in that role didn't show up, or I remember us just finding ourselves in that alley and we were like, okay, let's shoot this scene. And I realized, oh, there's no one here to play. And I can't remember if I think they didn't show up or canceled or were late. And so I ended up being like, we had to move, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to jump in. Like, Dylan Schneider DP'd that. He's a good buddy of mine and phenomenal cinematographer, but he shot that over my shoulder while I was like slinging the moonshine and creating dialogue with Tyler Kyle Rankin was the actor on that one.
That's awesome.
But, yeah, that was a fun one. That was one, talk about stages and videos. Like that's something I always, in every video I do, I try to incorporate stages or acts. So it's like, if you can do a 3-act structure, songs are meant for that, in my opinion, because it's like you have an intro, you have that first chorus, second verse, and then you go into a bridge moment or what would be your climax in a film, and then you go into the ending or the resolve. So for me, I'm like, it always needs to be 3 acts. If you can make it work. There's some songs out there that are just basically, a lot of hip hop country don't have that structure. So it's tough to do like a 3-act.
And those are the ones that I find it's hard for me as a viewer to stay engaged with.
Yeah, because just like the song's repetitive, the video typically ends up being repetitive. And I feel like it's actually more entertaining. Like we can fall into like being entertained audibly with a repetition like that a lot quicker than we can be visually. Like seeing the same thing, you want to see things unfold. You want to see like things grow or change. But audibly, it's like you can listen to stuff on a loop and be far more entertained quicker.
So what taught you to do the 3 stages? Was this something from studying the greats? And did this start in childhood with watching movies?
I think it was me getting bored of my own initial edits starting out. I think my first few music videos, I think it came from 2 things. It came from either wanting to tell too much story in too little of a time and realizing I had to push things quickly, which ended up falling into stages. Or it was having no stages and being like, God, this is boring. Like how, like if you can't entertain someone for 60 seconds. So like, what makes you think they'll be there for 3 minutes, you know?
Well put, especially with the attention spans these days, the way that you're structuring your videos do very well in that regard.
There's making a music video is a lot like making a song in the studio. I feel like too, like, I feel like a lot of people have probably said that, but going into the studio, you pick your things, right? Like, I don't know how much, you've probably spent a lot of time in the studio, but you've probably seen them where they're like dropping keys on a snare drum and it just makes this cool sound.
Yeah,
and it's
random
like
stuff.
Random stuff. But it's that little secret sauce that kind of gives it a thing. I feel like music videos are the same, where you have to try and come up with this weird recipe of like a balance of lighting and camera angle and camera movement and all these different things to try and engage the viewer. It's just like going in a restaurant and having a really fancy dish and realizing there's all these layers to it. It's like, it's appealing and it's pleasant and it's stimulating. I feel like music videos need to be the same way. And if you can combine that recipe and then give it 3 acts, it's like 3 courses. It's a lot more enjoyable for people. Yeah. And keeps their attention span.
And there's definitely the depth, there's the storytelling, and we're all looking for stories. We love stories.
Yeah.
That's what grabs people.
Yeah. And I often feel like the simpler stories are what ends up resonating the most. I realized that probably 2 or 3 years into directing music videos. Like, you always want to tell these big stories and you always want to spend this big money and go to all these places and make it feel massive. But some of my most successful stuff has been the simplest premise or concept. And it's like, there's ways to really get into the simplicity of it that falls back into authenticity, where if it's authentic, to me, I always relate it to sitting around at Thanksgiving. Like, every family member has a story they want to tell. Like, you're always just swapping stories, and they can be some of the simplest stories, but everybody's just laughing and having a good time. It's like, there's a depth there to find it in the medium of music videos to just relate in a simple but authentic way. And no one really turns their head from honesty, you know?
That's a good quote. But no one turns their head from honesty.
Yeah. Honesty is a lot easier to watch.
Yeah. And it's a lot easier to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if you're just honest. I think Merle Haggard said in my Vince Gill interview, he was talking about Merle Haggard. I think he said, if you're just honest, you got nothing to hide. Like, it is, I don't remember the exact quote, but it was really cool and refreshing. Like, just be honest.
That era of country was very honest. Like, all that outlaw country, like, there was no filter. They were very much so themselves, and it is easier to watch.
And they wrote their stories.
They wrote their stories.
And we're in a town of stories.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big, I think, vein through country music.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that Ken Burns documentary on country music.
I haven't.
You need to watch it.
Watch it.
It's really good. It's really long, though. It's a commitment, but I think it's like 7 episodes, and they're each like 2 hours or something.
Oh, wow.
So it takes you back from the Carters to like the end of the 90s, essentially.
Okay.
But it's really interesting in that the congruent theme through country music is stories.
Yeah.
And then when I think about pop music videos, it's not story based.
Yeah.
Like, I would say, I mean, not to say that they're not all that way, but I feel like the country music format is a lot more story based visually.
Country's much more story based. Yeah. I've done a handful. I've done some pop videos, and I do a little bit of rock as well. I'm very much so a punk rock kid at heart. It was punk rock and 90s country music for me.
Dude, how polarizing.
It was great though, because I feel like if you watch my stuff, it definitely shows up. My mom would listen to Brooks and Dunn in the kitchen growing up, and my dad would have AC/DC stuck in the cassette deck of his pickup truck. So it was like me yelling TNT, which might have been my first words, who knows? But the story aspect is much more present in country, but pop and rock have kind of that feeling and aesthetic, which is really cool. I think rock probably has more story in it. Nobody ever really listens to the lyrics, I feel like, in rock. Like, you'll find some real OG rock junkies that are like, and my dad's one of those. They'll be like, have you ever heard like Hold On Loosely? I can't remember who did that song now, but my dad, I remember using that as an example. And he's like, it's about like this relationship, and he was holding on to this girl too tight. And he'll like fully break down the story of this rock song. You don't get that quite as much in pop, which I don't think takes anything away from pop. I just think it's a different form of expression than... It's not quite as it's not quite as poetic sometimes. A lot of, I mean, look at Zach Bryan, like that dude's writing pure poetry songs right now, but like some will put him in the country box, but I feel like he's not really genre constrained by any means.
Which I like.
I do too. That's my kind of music. I don't think genre should exist anymore, to be honest.
I would agree 100%. Yeah. I think that, and that's a newer idea to me, by the way. But when you put someone in a box, or even as an artist or a musician, if you're asked, what kind of music do you make? It's always like being put on the spot. It's like being asked how much money's in your bank account.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. You're forced to box yourself for sure. Asking anyone to describe what they do, I feel like is very polarizing in the way that it's you almost should ask someone else that's familiar with their work, what kind of work do they do? Because it's very hard to be out of body and look at your own work. And that was a question I used to get all the time is how do you, and every interview you do or anything, it's always, how would you describe your style? And I'm like, I feel like how would others describe my style? You know, because it's tough to look at it, especially when you're trying to do new things in every project and suit the project. You fall into style by experience and by taste and opinion, which I feel like it also goes back to the honesty thing. If you're being honest with the way you like to work, you end up falling into that. But it is a tough question every time.
Yeah. What's the toughest part about it for you?
Probably having to sit back and catalog in my head all the different videos and think about what the common themes are. I get called the profile guy all the time. I think that ended up being my style. I shoot mostly profile on all the artists. Like there's a few straight on performances that I'll do every now and then, but I almost always connect to eye line out at the horizon and looking at an artist from the side or like a quarter profile.
And you're the one that's talking to the artist saying, look here, look there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the hierarchy of people that are involved in the making of a video. I'll look at music video or even on your posts and it'll say like directed by, a DP so-and-so, and people tag everybody that did, I guess, some important parts like who were operating cameras and all that. What are those and how did you rise to director?
So there's always department heads, right? So like every music video, depending on what the project needs, like you always have a producer and a director, and then you have an executive producer. Executive producer owns the production company or runs the production company or sometimes is paying for the project. And then you have your producers who book everybody. And then the director is probably the top position as you get to kind of control all the elements, just shy of the client. Like,
are you the writer? When something says director, does that mean that you're like the showrunner?
Pretty much, yeah. Director is in charge of the creative vision, and I own my own production company. So if it's going through my production company, I end up also controlling kind of how the money gets spent. Which departments get a little more money, whether it's lighting or art department, production design, camera. But climbing up through the ranks, every position is you have to have it. You can't replace or go without any of these positions. It's like, depending on, there's that core set. There's that core set of positions that you just can't get away without having. That would be camera department, lighting department, and art is one for me that when you're first starting out, you typically don't have art. Art is usually one of the first ones to go because it is money that a lot of times client can't see why it's getting spent. But art is everything from making sure there's plants behind your interview or making sure there's coffee sitting on the table. Like the things, it's the design of
and your Laney
props.
Wilson
heavy art department on the
heavy art
Laney commercial. Yeah, that was a heavy one. And that was a beverage commercial. So when you have a beverage commercial, you always have art department because they're polishing the glasses. They're making sure that there's no bubbles in the liquid when there shouldn't be bubbles in it. They're making sure there's bubbles in it when there should be bubbles in it. Things like that. But yeah, as far as rising up, I started as a PA in music videos, a production assistant. So I was getting coffee or paying someone's parking or whatever it took. But coming up through the ranks, you kind of get to an impasse or a fork in the road where you make a decision on hopefully knowing which department you want to be in, because sometimes you can go off into lighting or you can go off into camera. I was fortunate enough I PA'd enough times to kind of get a vibe for both. But I decided I didn't want to go into camera or lighting, and I was like, I just want to write stories. So I got into directing very early on. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to tell stories, and I want to have the control over how the lighting ends up taking place and how the camera ends up taking place. And directing is also a great seat to admire from, because you can look onto your DPs and look onto your gaffers and just sit in awe at how they're able to create stuff. Like, directing is really fun in that way that you get to go, like, you get to describe in a feeling and not in technical specific terms. So you can be like, I feel like this should be moodier, and they get to go, oh, well, that means, we need a sky panel over here with a quarter grid or whatever in front of it. And then they break down like how that's interpreted. But you can kind of jump positions depending on where you want to be. And that's kind of what I did. I was like, I just saw straight for the position I wanted and didn't screw around trying to learn any of the other stuff.
I love that.
Then I got to learn in reverse, though, because now, like, I get to watch the people that are best at it, and I have a better understanding, because directing is communicating. And if you can understand a little bit about what everybody does, Christopher Nolan obviously knows what he's doing. He says it really well, where he likes to know a little bit about everything that everyone does, just so that he can communicate better and come from like a ground up position with people to really understand workload and be a better communicator when he's trying to get the vision across.
How important is people skills?
People skills are everything as a director. I always joke that you spend probably 85% of your time just being a people person and 15% of your time actually directing. So, and being creative.
What do you find yourself having to do as a people person most?
It's balancing a lot of energy and relationship. You're igniting and diffusing situations at the same time. The director pretty much touches everything on the day. So for me, whether it's, making the client feel really good about what's happening on screen, or maybe explaining what's happening on screen in case it's not completely visible at the time, or letting them know why there's nothing on the screen yet, to then going over to your, like, typically, like, I'll have an assistant director, and that's kind of my second arm or my right arm on the day. It's like, hey, here's, what's going on over here on this side. I need to make sure this is on schedule and this is happening. And then they kind of go and trickle down the ladder to talk to the rest of the department heads. But the people skills are everything, because you're kind of, especially with artists, like, you're pretty much, if you're working with an artist on the day, you're pretty much just trying to keep their energy up, keep them interested, and kind of level out those moments between cut and action where you make sure they're coming into it with a good energy and also feel like everything is happening the way it should be.
Yeah.
And smiling when it's pouring rain outside and you're on a lightning delay and you're like, no, everything is fine. This is exactly what I wanted to happen at this point in the day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because to me, and you might agree, artists are the most insecure people, some of the most insecure people in the world.
Can be, yeah.
I've just found it amongst people, that are in the creative world, especially entertainers, that there's a huge level of insecurity, and to be reassured is so important. So the fact that you're talking about setting the environmental temperature and EQ is really interesting, because I watched a video of you on YouTube. It was a behind the scenes of a Matt Stell video. It was like a collab with him and someone else.
Okay.
They were performing on top of a truck.
Oh yeah. Matt Stell and Lathan Warlick's Over Yonder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was so interesting, because you were like, okay, so you're going to walk here, and then you're going to like put your hand and the light's going to hit you.
Yeah.
And you're the one that wrote the whole script, essentially, and what's going to happen. So you have the vision, and then you're there telling the artist how to act and then pull off your vision. Yeah. All the while making them feel confident, because the worst thing that could happen is for them to feel like they're not doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very much so that balance. You especially, like, I mean, it's always great when you can just sit there and be in your head and be thinking about the shot. But really, you need to be also thinking about the fact that when you call cut, they're probably going to be looking for some form of encouragement or some sort of validation that what they did is right. And I feel like the worst thing you can do is just go cut and then just walk away and leave them standing out there in the cold in front of camera, just like, was it good? Was it not good?
Do you have visions for your future outside of music videos?
Movies are the goal. I just shot a couple weeks ago, I guess a month ago now, I shot a short film that is a proof of concept on a feature film I wrote that is entirely not country. It's a punk rock film. And it's on that kind of circa 2005 punk rock third wave emo thing, tapping into a different side of stuff that I haven't done before or haven't shown before at least. But I wrote a script for it a couple years ago and put the finishing touches on it this year and decided to shoot it. So we went out and shot it on 16 millimeter film, and it's very non-music video. It's dialogue, 10-minute piece that's meant to be kind of a short film festival runner on the path to making the whole thing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love the film look.
Everyone tries to emulate film, and I'm like, why don't we just shoot on film again?
So
because it's too expensive. That's
yeah, it is. It's just like tape for records.
Yeah.
Because I see grain that's added. Is that added in post, or are you using film, or is it both?
I add grain typically. I'm very much so talk about the cassettes and listening to the imperfections on cassette players and vinyl players and all that. I'm very much so that way with the post process and digital. I shoot a lot of my work digital, but then I'll use vintage lenses a lot of times to add a softness or not quite as sharp as what a digital, like new age current day lens would have. And then sometimes we'll add another level of grain. I'm big into color correction, so I like to hire different color artists to come in and tone the video just to make it feel as nostalgic. And I'm very like No Country for Old Men or Hell or High Water or something like that. It's like,
yeah, I love the color in your videos.
Thank you. Color's one of my top items on my to-do list every video.
What's your biggest career fear?
I think my biggest career fear would be that I got content or comfortable. I don't ever want to find myself having done the same thing for 10 years or even a year and having not grown or trying something new or pushed myself to some degree.
How hard are you on yourself when it comes to perfection?
Pretty hard. And probably not so much on perfection, but self-improvement is I'm pretty hard on.
Yeah. I know, like, not so perfection in the sense of like it's not like we were talking about the human aspect, but execution of your vision and like making sure that the day went well. I'm pretty
hard on myself for making sure that the project goes exactly according to plan, but I'm also very collaborative with happy accidents. So my rule of thumb is to set the groundwork very intentionally, do a ton of prep work, do a ton of work on the front end so that you kind of give yourself bumpers for when you actually go do it. And then it's like a sandbox to play in that you can't fall out of. It's like you just try and do stuff within the parameters you've set for yourself. And sometimes there's obstacles that are unavoidable. There's some problem solving that you can get away with and still maintain on track. But typically I find that if you put yourself on track ahead of time, you're going to stay there. And then at the end of the day, it's going to be 99% exactly what you saw on the back of your eyelids.
Love that.
Yeah.
When did you learn your self-worth as a director?
That's a great question. I think it was probably getting my first big video. Like once I got like I think it was a Jameson Rogers video I got. Jameson's great if you haven't listened to him. I remember.
Yeah, I watched the one that he did with Luke Combs.
That's a great video.
That you did for everyone listening.
Thank you. That was a fun one.
That's a fun video.
It was a super fun video. Yeah, that was a logistical nightmare of a video because we had like 7 locations and a 12-hour day to do it, and I only had Luke for 2 hours. So it's pretty crazy watching that video to know that we only shot his stuff in 2 hours. Because
he's such a big part of that video.
Such a big part of that video. And we had, for everyone out there watching, we had 2 camera teams on that video because of his 2 hours. So we really just covered a lot of ground from 2 different angles. It was 2 full camera teams just to make sure that we got everything within 2 hours. Wow. Which you don't get to do very often. It's like, it's case by case, but...
Is it like, hey, yeah, he can do the video, but we only have this much time?
Yeah, he was touring pretty heavily and also becoming very popular at the time. And he was gracious enough to even offer to be in the video. And once we found out we had him in the video, they were like, well, you can only have him from this time to this time. And so we had to figure out how to make that work, but it worked out great. The video looks awesome. That's one of my favorite videos to date. Like, I love that video.
And what I love most about that video is the intro.
Thanks. That intro from Cold Beer Calling My Name was probably the first big push for live dialogue in a music video that I did. And I remember someone from the labels team talking about how they were trying to get more streams off of YouTube at the time for songs. So they actually didn't really want there to be live dialogue in it. And I had to fight really hard to keep the live dialogue in it because it throws people out. Because a lot of people, I guess, will listen to YouTube playlists. I have not. But some people will listen to YouTube just for the song. So if you're just listening and, you're cooking in your kitchen and you hear someone talking, it's a little disconcerting. But yeah. But I love it. I'm so glad it ended up staying in the video.
Yeah. What books are you reading?
A Creative Act, A Way of Being. Rick Rubin is great.
I'm a huge Rick Rubin fan.
Rick Rubin's great. There's another book that I feel like applies to life, but is strictly for directors and actors. It's called Directing Actors by Judith Weston. I've read it 2 or 3 times now.
Okay.
But it's solely about how to communicate with actors and understand the actor process of how they come to their roles. And obviously in music videos, you get to work with actors a little bit, but my long-term goal is movies and stories and full-fledged stories. Music videos rarely get to dive into the actual backstory and the actual upcome of a story. There's no precursor. It's just very much so a moment. But this book Judith wrote is phenomenal about diving into the actor's process and how everything has to stem from a source of realism, and actors try to take the lines and make them very much so their own, even if they need to change the inflection or intention a little on some of the words. It comes from a place of genuine experience or something they can relate to. And I think that's a great rule for life, right? Like, if we can go through life reading our lines and performing our script from a place of realism, like, we're going to feel some self-worth and confidence in the fact that we're not a poser or being fake.
Yeah, that we keep coming back to that in this conversation is knowing self, a sense of self. And I'm going to be honest with you, Dustin, I get confused about who I am.
It's because we're always growing.
Yeah, we are, but it's confusing because you'll ask someone what their identity is. Yeah. Like, what's your identity? And quite often the answer is, well, I do a podcast, or I do videos, music videos. Yeah. No, that's what you do for work.
But what's your identity?
What's your identity? Like, who are you? And we talk about this with artists as well. Yeah. Like, Cody Johnson really knows who Cody Johnson is.
Yeah.
But like, that sense of self, does Cody even know who Cody is? Or do we just perceive to think that Cody knows who Cody is, but Cody's just being Cody?
Yeah.
And it's just like, and that's Dustin's just being Dustin and Stephan's just being Stephan. Yeah. And that's who I am. And it might change and evolve. Yeah. But because in the music business, they want you to be in a lane. So when it comes to creativity, if you're an artist and you're going for it, they want to see, like, okay, your sound is congruent, your look is congruent. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like a band like Midland. Yeah. You look at them, you're like, okay, Midland, they got the look, they got the sound. Yeah. Midland is Midland. You don't even need to say anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Because I'm just talking about it,
Yeah.
and just being candid. I get really hung up on this sense of the whole self thing.
I think, especially in your formative years, you're trying to find that sense of self-worth and your identity, right? Like every teenager goes through it. It's like, oh, who am I? Like, what am I into? What am I, like, what are my goals? What are my passions? And I'm a big believer in, like, even, especially if you're a creative, you have a brand. Like, a lot of people, a lot of creatives work for brands, but they neglect to think about what their brand is. And I think brand is it's a more commercialized word for identity, I feel like, but it's something that someone can look at you and go, oh, I see a similarity between you and this. And for me, it's your lifestyle, right? Like, I saw a Dana White quote the other day talking about how I think he was talking about the key to happiness. And he was talking about how he tried to align his life in such a way that he couldn't wait to wake up every day. And he's like, I just put myself in a lifestyle and a thing that I get like 4 or 5 hours of sleep on average a night because I just can't wait. I can't go to bed because I'm too excited about what I'm doing, and I can't wait to wake up because I can't wait to start doing it again. And I think that kind of identifies self in a way that we all have interests and passions, and that as much as we can like align ourselves with those or place ourselves in places to experience it, can be where you live or what you do for a hobby. It kind of gives you some identity and all that.
Yeah. And it's interesting for me because I moved here for music and I have been coming here for so long. But then I was like, the music business is in a weird spot, and record contracts and pub deals kind of suck.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and then my wife had the idea to do this podcast. So now I'm doing a podcast, but like when I go in, I go all in on something.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, all of a sudden I went from having this expectation of really chasing the music thing to now sitting down and talking with people that are in the business and educating and helping people. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm helping more people in the amount of episodes I put out with this podcast than I ever have playing music outside of playing music in church, which I felt like was a special thing growing up, to be part of that and part of people's worship and stuff. Yeah. It's rewarding, but it's interesting because now I'm like looking at my sense of self and I'm like, am I like Jay Shetty or Lewis Howes or Ed Milet, all these guys that I listen to in the podcast world. And now I'm like learning that about myself. Yeah. And it's weird, man. It's weird for me.
It's weird. And especially anytime you venture into something new that maybe feels a little out of pocket, you end up, there's some self-doubt there, right? And you're like, wait, is this what I would do? Is this like in line with where I want to be going? But it's always good to keep moving.
It is, yeah. And it totally is for me. For me, all the pieces connected on this podcast thing. Because it was like all the music stuff I learned, the connections I had, all of a sudden I can sit down and just have conversations and make friends. Yeah. That's my goal at the end of all of these is like, I could think I texted you yesterday. Yeah. You're like, are there any talking points? I was like, no, we're going to sit down and just have a conversation. Easy. And then hopefully, at the end we'll be friends. And that's kind of my goal with this whole thing. But it's also interesting pivoting into that world and learning to talk and ask questions.
Yeah. Everybody needs to talk a little more and dive in and realize a little bit about everyone else, Yeah. It's like, and you never know what's coming in life either as far as, I feel like that's a very common theme for musicians is talking about like when their shot's going to be right, or like maybe I'm not right for where the industry is right now. And everybody, you've heard the term 10-year town. Everybody talks about that. I always try to paint the illustration in my mind that life is like it's like a gear, right, with little notches on it, and it's kind of just always moving, but your notches might not fit at the right time. Like you're this other gear over here, but as long as you like keep moving and keep reshaping and doing your thing and staying very much so yourself, eventually it's going to come around and pick you up and you're going to get your shot. Mm-hmm. I feel like everyone, no matter what you want to do in life, you get your shot and you get that crossroad at some point in time. You just need to make sure that you're there for it. It's like what the saying goes, success is when luck and preparation meet or something like that.
Yeah.
That may be the phrase. I may have just made that
No,
up.
it is. And I've heard it a lot, and I think it's very true. You mentioned Dana White. Who are some of the people you listen to?
I read a lot of Rick Rubin stuff.
Let's go there for a sec.
Yeah.
So Rick Rubin, to me, a purist.
Yeah.
I've watched I think it's an HBO documentary, Shangri-La. There's like 3 episodes. It was a Malibu recording studio.
Yeah.
But I've watched him, and I particularly like his Andrew Huberman interview. Rick is just so interesting in that he says, think of the audience last.
Yeah.
And these controversial, creative ideas that go against the machine.
Yeah.
But then you look at his success and you think, okay, he's right. Because if you chase what you think the people are going to want versus doing the thing that the artist knows inside you need to do, that's what's gonna change people's lives.
I think Rick is incredibly inspired and very intellectual. He's also someone who is so good at self-love, which is such a hard thing a creative. And we're all subject to what we think people think of our work, right? Like that's kind of how you dictate your success. And as soon as you can disassociate from that, the crowd, think of the audience last, it's like you can actually enjoy the work, which is, I'm totally quoting from his book right now, I know, but reading a couple of his pieces of work really helped me. A friend of mine gave me a Creative Act book, and I was like, I actually told my wife, I was like, man, if this guy started a cult, I might be in it. But it's just so refreshing to hear that voice, because a lot of times competition is what runs the creative field, right? Like you're always, especially with Instagram and everything today, you're just sitting there trying to think, is my podcast better than their podcast, or is it at least up to the quality of their podcast, or are my music videos up to the quality today? And I kind of quit thinking about that stuff, because like Rick Rubin's really great at it. He's like, if you don't enjoy the work, then what are you doing it for?
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to put blinders on to be able to enjoy
That's
it.
what I was just going to say. You have to put blinders on. I don't compare myself to other people's podcasts. I just know that I want mine to be as good as Jay Shetty's on a production level.
Yeah.
And I want to have a team, and I want to have 5 camera angles.
I feel like you can take more pride too in your work when you at least feel like it's almost like starting a painting, right? If you're going to start a painting, but you're looking at 10 other paintings by different artists, and you're like also trying to paint yours, at the end of the day, are you really going to feel like it's yours? And like, are you going to be proud of it? Or are you going to feel like you just pulled direct inspiration from these others and copied it? It's like, if you can not compare yourself, there's a difference between doing research and then comparing. Doing research and filling your creative bank and then letting that come out in your own language is a whole lot more effective than just sitting there and shot for shot copying somebody. Yeah.
Which is what we all do, is we take in, we gather data, and then we regurgitate it in our own little way.
All the greats say that too. Like everyone says that. Tarantino says it. Like all these great artists in their own right talk about how it's all recycled art, right? Like they've experienced things, and there's feelings that took root from seeing or experiencing some other form of art. And then when they expressed it in their own way, it became this accumulative melody of just images or sounds or whatever it was. It's like, and we're only going to experience that more today as, generation after generation. Like there's a huge bank of things to experience now that you can pull inspiration from everywhere. Like, I mean, and especially not even in your field. Like one of the most helpful things for me visually was reading poetry again. Poetry is, I feel like it's not as quickly found for people in the visual industry. Like a lot of times you're looking at reading books and watching movies and doing that, but experiencing poetry is such a really mellow, unfiltered way of finding visuals. I've found that I'll read poetry and just get all these images in my head that feel so abstract and wild.
I really appreciate you sharing your stories, some insights into things that got me personally thinking, and hopefully will help others that are in not only the field that you work in, and that are chasing their dream in general. But outside of, that, just like anybody that's interested in moving to Nashville to do this thing that we all want to do, and how it works, and just understanding, I think, and we didn't even talk about it, but I know for you to get to where you are and to be winning these awards at these huge award shows, you worked your butt off. We didn't talk about it, but it's implied that if you're going to get to be the director of major music videos with huge celebrities and superstars, you worked really hard to get there. And I think that's one thing that is a huge takeaway from this. And you're an inspiration. So thank you very much for being on.
Thanks for having me on. This was fun. Hopefully we inspired some people to stay in on the creative side of things and experience some self-worth and self-love.
Yeah, self-love and keeping at it.
Keeping at it.
And that's a wrap on today's podcast. Please leave a review, like, share, subscribe. Special thank you to Dustin Haney for sharing his time, his talent. Hopefully this podcast is bringing you value, helping you in your journey, and encouraging you. Have a great week. Keep hustling. And in the words of David Goggins, stay hard.